I still remember the sting of his words as they hung in the air between us. 3 years together. And this is what it had come to me, standing in our kitchen, clutching a rejection letter from yet another publishing house while David looked at me with that expression. Not anger, not disappointment. Something worse, pity. Maybe this is a sign, Ellie, he said, his voice measured like he was explaining something to a child. You've been trying for 2 years now. At some point, you have to face reality. He leaned against our granite countertop, the one in the apartment he mostly paid for because his corporate law career actually went somewhere. I crumpled the letter in my fist. It's just one more rejection. Every writer gets them, but not every writer gets only rejections. The words sliced through me. I'm not trying to hurt you, but I'm worried about us, about our future. He sighed, running his hand through his perfectly styled hair. Maybe it's time to use that English degree for something practical. Sarah's firm is hiring content writers. It's not creative writing, but at least it's something. That's when he said it the words that would change everything. I've always admired your passion, babe, but honestly, I need someone who matches my ambition. Someone who's going somewhere. His eyes flicked to his watch, the Rolex I'd saved 6 months to buy him for his birthday. I've got a dinner meeting. We can talk more later. As the door clicked shut behind him, something inside me cracked open. I wasn't just hurt. I was furious. At him. At myself. At the life I'd allowed to become so small. I looked down at the crumpled rejection in my hand and made a decision. This wouldn't be my ending. It would be my beginning. Our relationship had started like a fairy tale. We met at a friend's gallery opening, me, the struggling writer working as a barista, him the rising star at a prestigious law firm. He'd been charming, attentive, and seemed genuinely interested in my writing dreams. For the first year, David was my biggest cheerleader. Then things changed. Subtle at first. Comments about how I should network more. Suggestions that my literary fiction was too niche and I should try something commercial. Offers to introduce me to people who could help. His support began to feel like pressure, his advice like criticism. Meanwhile, I slipped into a role I never intended to play, the supportive girlfriend who put her own ambitions on the back burner. I edited his briefs, hosted dinner parties for his colleagues, and became the perfect accessory at firm events. My writing happened in stolen moments, and rejections piled up in a drawer I kept locked. Our apartment became a shrine to his success: law school diplomas, bar admission certificates, photos with judges and partners. My contribution was keeping it beautiful, making it a showcase worthy of a rising legal star. The only evidence of my dreams was a small desk tucked in the corner of our bedroom while my manuscript gathered dust. "You're so lucky," his colleague's wife told me at a Christmas party. "David's going places. Partner track for sure." I smiled and nodded, wondering when I'd started measuring my worth by his achievements. Wondering when I'd stopped believing I could have any of my own. What hurt most wasn't that David had stopped believing in me. It was that I had stopped believing in myself. But his words that night in our kitchen had ripped away the comfortable numbness I'd been hiding behind. The pain was excruciating, but at least I could feel something again. The weeks after David's ambition speech were a blur of silent dinners and hollow conversations. We moved around each other like ghosts, the space between us growing wider with each passing day. I'd catch him watching me sometimes, a question in his eyes that neither of us was brave enough to voice. "I think you'd really like the content team at Sarah's firm," he said one night, sliding a business card across the table. "I mentioned you, and they're interested in setting up an interview." That was the match that lit the fuse. "You did what?" My voice was so quiet I barely recognized it. "I'm trying to help, Ellie. This opportunity won't wait forever." "Did you tell them about my cute little writing hobby too? How I need a real job, because clearly I'm not ambitious enough for someone like you." The words poured out, acidic and burning. David's jaw tightened. "That's not fair. I've supported your writing for years, but at some point, practicality has to enter the conversation." "Supported? Is that what you call the constant suggestions that I should write something marketable, or the way you check your phone whenever I talk about my novel? Or how you introduced me as the girlfriend to that publisher at your firm's party instead of mentioning I'm a writer?" His face flushed. I was trying to spare you the awkwardness. What was I supposed to say? This is my girlfriend who's been trying to get published for years with nothing to show for it. The room seemed to tilt. Nothing to show for it. I repeated, each were a knife. Is that all you see when you look at me? A failure? That's not what I meant. It's exactly what you meant. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. You know what, David? You're right. I don't match your ambition. Because mine isn't about corner offices or partner tracks or impressing people at cocktail parties. But that doesn't make it worth less. I walked out of the dining room, his protest fading behind me. In our bedroom, I stared at my writing desk, the one he'd bought me our first Christmas together. The irony wasn't lost on me. Even my creative space had been defined by him. That night, I slept in the guest room, surrounded by the ghosts of the person I used to be and the writer I'd failed to become. 3 days after our fight, I found myself sitting in a coffee shop I'd never been to before, miles from our apartment. I needed neutral territory, somewhere without David's influence. The barista placed a steaming latte in front of me, artwork in the foam that would disappear with the first sip. Temporary beauty, just like everything else. I opened my laptop and stared at the blank document. The cursor blinked accusingly. Start again. Start over. How many times had I tried? But something was different now. The weight of David's expectations had been crushing me, but his words had also shattered the chains I'd placed on myself. I began to type. Not my usual literary prose, but something raw and unfiltered, a first-person account of a woman realizing her relationship was slowly killing her spirit. The words poured out of me, honest and unflinching. 3 hours passed in what felt like minutes. When I finally looked up, the coffee shop was nearly empty and my latte had gone cold. That evening, David called. Are you coming home tonight? His voice was strained, concern mixed with irritation. No. The simplicity of my answer surprised us both. Ellie, we need to talk about this. Running away won't solve anything. I'm not running away. For the first time in years, I'm running towards something. I ended the call and turned back to my laptop. By morning, I had the framework of something that felt more authentic than anything I'd written before. It wasn't the literary masterpiece I'd been struggling with for years. It was messier, more visceral, and it was entirely mine. The next day, I did something I hadn't done in over a year. I called my old writing group, the one I'd gradually stopped attending because David thought they weren't serious enough about publishing. Tracy answered on the second ring. Ellie, is that really you? Where have you been hiding? I took a deep breath. I've been lost, but I think I'm finding my way back. Is there still room in the group for me? Her laugh was like a lifeline. Girl, your chair's been empty too long. We meet tomorrow night. Come home. For the first time in months, I felt something that had been missing from my life and my writing. Hope. The night before I was to rejoin my writing group, memories ambushed me in my hotel room. I remembered the girl I was before, David, braver, wilder, unapologetic about her dreams. The kind of girl who stayed up all night writing because the characters wouldn't let her sleep. The kind who sent out manuscripts with more excitement than fear. Mom's voice echoed in my head. You've got stars in your eyes, Ellie girl. But stars don't pay the bills. She'd worked 2 jobs after Dad left, practical to her core. Her greatest fear was that I'd inherit his artistic temperament, along with his green eyes. When I met David, he'd seemed like the perfect balance, someone who appreciated creativity but understood stability. Mom had approved immediately. He'll keep your feet on the ground, she'd said, like that was the highest compliment. Maybe that's why I ignored the warning signs. The way he checked the time when I read in my work. The subtle shift from when you get published to if you get published. The comparisons to his sister, who'd turned her art degree into a successful graphic design career. She's practical, he'd say. She found a way to make it work. I remember our trip to Chicago 2 years ago, the only vacation we'd taken that wasn't tied to his work. I dragged him to a famous bookstore, pointing out where my novel would someday sit on the shelves. It's good to have dreams, he'd said, squeezing my shoulder. Not, I believe in you, or you'll make it happen. Just an acknowledgement that dreams existed. That night, he proposed, and somehow, As the ring slipped onto my finger, my dreams began slipping away. I never told him the truth that I'd received an acceptance letter from a small press the week before his proposal. An acceptance I turned down because their advance was tiny and they wanted significant revisions that would have required months of focused work. David had been up for a promotion, and I convinced myself it wasn't the right time to take such a risk, that there would be better opportunities later. There never were. And eventually, I stopped creating opportunities for myself. Sitting alone in that hotel room, I finally admitted the painful truth. David hadn't killed my ambition. I had sacrificed it on the altar of our relationship, one compromise at a time. The writing group met in the back room of an independent bookstore that somehow survived the digital age. Mismatched chairs, the smell of old books and fresh coffee, and the familiar faces of people who created worlds with words. Tracy hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. "Look what the literary winds blew in," Marcus said, pulling out a chair for me. "We've missed your voice around here." I felt like an imposter. These people had kept writing, kept submitting, kept believing while I'd been arranging charcuterie boards for David's colleagues. After everyone shared their work, Elena, our group's most published member, cornered me by the coffee pot. "You've been gone a long time. What brought you back?" I hesitated, then told her everything: David's comment, our fight, the new piece I was working on. Elena's eyes never left my face. When I finished, she didn't offer sympathy or platitudes. Instead, she said, "Send me your pages. The real ones, not the safe ones." "What do you mean?" "I mean the words that scare you. The ones you're afraid to let anyone see." She refilled her mug. "Look, I've been watching you dim your light for years. Even before you stopped coming, you were holding back. Writing what you thought would please the market, please your boyfriend, please everyone except yourself. That's not." I started to protest, then stopped. She was right. The piece you shared tonight, for the first time, I heard your actual voice. Raw, unfiltered, powerful. She handed me her card. "I'm editing an anthology of emerging voices. Deadlines in 3 weeks. Send me something that frightens you to write. Something that would make your perfect boyfriend uncomfortable." Ex-boyfriend, I corrected, though we hadn't officially ended things. Elena smiled. "Even better. Nothing fuels great writing like a broken heart and righteous anger." As I left the bookstore, my phone lit up with text from David. "We need to talk. Please come home. I miss you." I turned my phone off and headed back to my hotel. I had writing to do. The email from Elena came 2 days after I submitted my piece for the anthology, a raw, unflinching essay about ambition, relationships, and the quiet ways women are taught to make themselves smaller for the men they love. "This is what I've been waiting for from you. It's in." The launch event is next month at Skylight Books. You'll read an excerpt. Start practicing now. I read the email 3 times, waiting for the catch. When it finally sank in that this was real, that my words would be published, that I would stand in front of an audience and claim them as mine, I felt dizzy with a mixture of terror and exhilaration. That same morning, another email arrived. This one from Jackson Literary Review, responding to a short story I'd submitted months ago and forgotten about. "We would like to publish Threshold in our fall issue." One acceptance might be luck. 2 in the same week felt like validation. Like maybe David had been wrong about me all along. I hadn't spoken to him in almost 3 weeks. I'd returned to the apartment once to gather more clothes while he was at work, leaving a note that simply said I needed space. He'd respected that mostly. The occasional text. A voicemail asking if we could meet for coffee just to talk. I wasn't ready. But as the anthology launch approached, something shifted. I wanted him to see this. Needed him to witness what I was capable of when I stepped out from his shadow. I crafted a text. "I'm reading at Skylight Books on the 15th, 7 p.m., part of the Emerging Voices anthology. If you want to understand why I left, come listen." His response came almost immediately. "I'll be there." What he didn't know, what I hadn't told him, was that my piece was essentially about us. About him. About how his version of ambition had nearly extinguished mine. He would be hearing along with a room full of strangers. The thought should have terrified me. Instead, it felt like justice. 1 week before the event, the final revelation came in the form of an email from Catherine Bell, the editor who had rejected my novel manuscript, the rejection I'd been holding when David delivered his ambition speech. I've been following your recent publications with interest and wonder if you might reconsider my offer to revise and resubmit your novel. I stared at the screen in disbelief. Not a rejection, a revise and resubmit, one of the most promising responses a writer can receive. I scrolled down to see the original email chain and froze. The original email had come 3 months ago. It contained detailed revision suggestions and an invitation to resubmit. An email I had never seen. But David had. His response, from his personal email to my account, thanking Catherine for her feedback and saying he would make sure Ellie gets this, was right there in the thread. He had intercepted my acceptance, had hidden it from me, and then had the audacity to tell me I wasn't ambitious enough. My hand shook as I picked up my phone. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated that it left me breathless. I typed a new message to David. Still coming to the reading? His response, wouldn't miss it. Good, I thought. Neither would I. The week after discovering David's betrayal, I moved through the world with new eyes. Colors seemed brighter, sounds clearer. The numbness that had enveloped me for years was replaced by a fiery clarity of purpose. I found an apartment, a tiny studio above a bookstore in a neighborhood David would consider transitional. The landlord knocked $200 off the monthly rent in exchange for me working 10 hours a week in the store. It wasn't law firm money, but combined with my savings and the anthology payment, it was enough to start over. Elena helped me revise my anthology piece, sharpening it into something undeniable. Don't hold back, she said during our final editing session. You're not just telling your story. You're telling the story of countless women who've dimmed their light for men who claim to love their brightness. The night before the reading, Tracy and Marcus helped me move the last of my things from David's apartment. We timed it for when he'd be in court. I left my key on the counter, along with a copy of Catherine's original email, the one he'd hidden from me. No note, no explanation. He didn't deserve one. Are you nervous about tomorrow? Tracy asked as we carried my writing desk to her truck. Seeing him, I mean. No, I said, surprised to realize it was true. I'm not afraid of him anymore. That night, in my new apartment, I practiced my reading until the words became part of me. With each repetition, I felt stronger, more certain. The woman who had shrunk herself to fit into David's life was gone. In her place stood someone I was just getting to know, someone with a voice that deserved to be heard. As dawn broke over the city, I made myself a promise. No matter what happened at the reading, no matter how David reacted, I would never again make myself smaller for anyone. My ambition might look different from his, but it burned just as bright. Perhaps brighter because it was authentically mine. Skylight Books was packed. Standing room only, with people crowded between bookshelves and sitting cross-legged on the floor. Elena had warned me the anthology was generating buzz, but I wasn't prepared for this. 7 writers, each with a piece that exposed some raw truth. I was scheduled to read last. From my seat near the podium, I scanned the crowd, looking for David. Just as the host began introductions, he slipped in the back door. Perfectly tailored suit, hair expertly styled, every inch the successful attorney. Our eyes met briefly before I looked away. Let him wait. Let him wonder. The other readings blurred together as my heartbeat pounded in my ears. And then the host was saying my name, describing me as a powerful new voice examining the intersection of love, ambition, and identity. The crowd applauded as I took my place at the podium. This piece is called Ambitious Enough, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. From the corner of my eye, I saw David straighten in his seat. I began to read. Words about a woman who slowly erases herself for a man who claims to want her success while undermining it at every turn. About the subtle ways ambition is gendered. About discovering a betrayal so fundamental it rewrites an entire relationship's history. I didn't name David, but I described the hidden email in detail, the revise and resubmit opportunity that might have changed everything. The calculated decision to keep it from me, followed by accusations that I wasn't ambitious enough. The audience was utterly silent. When I reached the final lines, his ambition require my subjugation. Mine demands my liberation. The silence held for one heartbeat before erupting into applause. As people stood, as Elena embraced me, as strangers lined up to have their anthologies signed, I finally allowed myself to look directly at David. His face was white, his expression a complex mixture of anger, shame, and something that might have been regret. He waited until the signing ended, approached as I gathered my things. That wasn't fair, Ellie. His voice was tight, controlled. You didn't tell the whole story. Which part did I miss? The part where you decided my career wasn't worth pursuing? Or the part where you actively sabotaged it and then had the audacity to criticize my ambition? I was trying to protect you. You were getting rejection after rejection. That one positive response would have given you false hope. I laughed a genuine, incredulous laugh. False hope? It wasn't your decision to make. That was my opportunity, my career, my life. Our life, he corrected. We were building something together. No, you were building something. I was just an accessory. I shoulder my bag. I don't need your kind of protection, David. And I don't need your approval to be ambitious. I just needed to remember that my dreams are just as valid as yours. As I turned to leave, he grabbed my arm. Ellie, please. We can work this out. I was wrong about the email, I see that now. But don't throw away 3 years over one mistake. I looked down at his hand on my arm, then back at his face. It wasn't one mistake. It was a pattern. And it stops now. I walked away, Elena waiting by the door to escort me to the after party. As we stepped into the cool night air, she squeezed my shoulder. Proud of you, kid. How do you feel? I took a deep breath. Like I can finally write the ending I deserve. 6 months after the anthology reading, my life had transformed in ways I could never have predicted. My revised novel was under contract with Catherine's publishing house, not a huge advance, but enough to validate my decision. The anthology had opened doors, leading to freelance writing assignments and an adjunct teaching position at a local college. My studio apartment above the bookstore had become a true home. My writing desk, the one piece of furniture I'd taken from my life with David, sat below a window overlooking a small courtyard. Most mornings, I woke before dawn to write for 2 hours before heading my teaching job or down to the bookstore for my shift. The life I'd built wasn't glamorous by David's standards. No luxury vacations or designer clothes. But it was authentically mine, filled with work that mattered to me and people who valued what I had to offer. I heard about David occasionally through mutual friends. He made partner, as everyone expected, bought a house in the hills, started dating a prosecutor from the DA's office. By all external metrics, his ambition was paying off exactly as planned. I was sitting in a coffee shop near campus, grading student papers when he walked in. 6 months had changed us both. He looked tired behind his professional polish. I probably looked more bohemian than he remembered, with my hair grown out and silver earrings Tracy had made for my birthday. Our eyes met, and after a moment's hesitation, he approached my table. Mind if I join you? I gestured to the empty chair across from me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I read your piece in The Atlantic last month, he finally said, about creative ambition in the gig economy. It was excellent. Thank you. I set aside my grading. Congratulations on making partner. He nodded, a small smile playing at his lips. Different versions of success, I guess. But both valid. Yes. He looked down at his coffee. I was wrong, Ellie. What I did with that email, it was unforgivable. And what I said about your ambition, I mistook my definition of success for the only definition. I studied his face, searching for the manipulation I'd grown to expect. Found only sincerity. I forgive you, I said, surprising myself with the truth of it. Not for your sake, but for mine. I can't carry that anger anymore. Relief washed over his features. I am glad, and I want you to know, I'm proud of what you've accomplished. You proved me wrong in the best possible way. As we talked about his new case, my upcoming book, mutual friends, I realized something important. I'd spent years trying to be the woman David wanted. Then I'd spent months defining myself in opposition to him. Now, finally, I was simply myself. neither accommodating him nor rebelling against him, just living my own truth. When we said goodbye, it felt like closing a chapter rather than slamming a door. The wounds he'd inflicted had become scars, evidence of pain survived, lessons learned, strength gained. I returned to my grading with a lighter heart, secure in the knowledge that my ambition had never been the problem. It had been the solution all along. A year to the day after David told me I wasn't ambitious enough, I stood in a different bookstore, reading from my newly published novel. As I looked out at the crowd of supporters, students, and strangers, I realized the most powerful ambition isn't about external validation or conventional success. True ambition is the courage to become fully yourself, even when others can't see your vision. Especially then,